and Head of the Department of Medicine, AVMCH, a PG Coordinator and Member, Institutional Research Committee. Welcome all to this day 4 of the Research Methodology Workshop. We have two eminent speakers for today's session. Professor Amol Dongre, Steps in Protocol Development. Sir is Professor Community Medicine, PSMC, Gujarat. And our critical appraisal of journal article by our Dean, Professor P.F. Kotur. And it will be followed by evaluation of the pre-test by Professor Vishnu Bhatt, Director Research, AVMC. Now I invite Dr. Aarti for the rapporteur's report. Dr. Aarti?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Rapporteur's report for day 3, research methodology workshop. The first presentation was by Dr. V.N. Mahalakshmi on selecting appropriate research design for our research questions. So how to choose a research design, that was her topic. And she said about about considering, consideration that we should keep before choosing a research question. And with the quotes, she started, the best is the enemy of the good. That is, like, we have to look into the feasibility and then what is a good question, and the question is important, she went about saying. She also told us, like, what is a proper research design means, or study design means. And in simple, what I took it is like, it's a blueprint, how we are going to work about with it, and what is the plan that I have for it, and what is the strategy that I have for it. And she also gave us a nice example of CABG, in which stents were being placed continuously, coronary trap bypass grafts and stents were being continuously placed, and later the research showed that convention is it's the better one. And that she told it for where she said, though there are theories, and theories are very nice, we can just bridge over a block, but sometimes the ugly fact becomes the evidence, and that's what we are supposed to be into it. And she went in to tell about the PICOTS, that is the population, intervention, comparison, outcome type of question, and the study design. And then we started matching our research questions. And as we matched our research questions, we were also highlighted about the hierarchy of evidence that we have to keep in mind. And when we are matching, the first thing that becomes the priority is the question. And the question should take into consideration the outcome and the evidence that it's going to produce. And the one more thing that took me up is, if you're going to spend 6 months into a research, why not do a good research? So if the question is correct, then our designs becomes good and tested properly. So that's what. And ma'am finished us with 3 nice take-home messages. So to highlight the take-home messages, research design is a function of question and it's not a choice. And if you want an unbiased result, matching the design to the question is important, because we cannot go about applying any design to any study, though a question can have multiple design, not any for any. And we have to take outcome and time frame into consideration. Our next section was on sampling. And for sampling, we had Dr. Madangi, DC Madangi, Dr. DC Madangi, and ma'am went about to say from what is sampling? That is from a big to a small if we are extracting. And most important she highlighted is that it should be predefined. That's the most important part. The next she said is the need for sampling. Why do we need sampling? She highlighted. And to say a few of why do we need sampling is, one is the budget, the resources, particularly she highlighted on the human resources also. So human resource also becomes an important, she said. And the accuracy of the data, the intensive and exhaustive data, those all we have to consider when we see about the need for sampling, she said. Next, the sampling method, ma'am went into the probability type of sampling and the non-probability type of sampling. And she went about explaining each of the probability sampling methods as simple random sampling, cluster random sampling, systematic sampling, and stratified random sampling she went into. And then in non-probability, she said when we have an hypothesis and we want to do an exploratory research and our budget and time is constrained, then we go in for a non-probability sampling. And there she explained to us about a conventional type of sampling and quota sampling. So those and snowball type of sampling, and these all we saw about the sampling methods and types of sampling. So that was our first two session. Ma'am?
Thank you, Dr. Aarti. Now I invite
Yes.
Dr. Ramya, Assistant Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology Department, to continue with the repertoire report on questionnaire design and validation. Dr. Ramya, please.
Good afternoon, all. So the third session was regarding the questionnaire validation of questionnaire or scale, which was done by Dr. Pankaj P. Shah, who was Professor and Head Department of Community Medicine in SRMC. Sir went with how the questionnaire should be matching with the objective. How the objective becomes very important was his first very much important point, and how it should very much match with the objective, the questionnaire. Then how the questionnaire will lead, like whether the questionnaire should be our own or someone else. So if it is someone else, then how should we go for the literature search, and whether it should be in the whether it is present in our same language, and it is depending on our culture. So all these should be sorted out in case of literature search. That is, these are all will be related in case of when the questionnaire is related to abstract sign. When the questionnaire is very specific or something like yes or no questions, doesn't requires much validation. But if you are going for a questionnaire which requires the abstract sign, it requires validation, and it requires the literature review. So if for in the literature review, if we want to translate for a questionnaire, if it is present in some other language to our own language, then that will require validation. So after if someone is wanting to prepare questionnaire, their own questionnaire, they should also get their opinion from experts. So at the beginning, we should start with more number of questions. So after getting more number of questions, we should go for even cognitive interview is what sir told. Like after cognitive interviewing, we will shortlist our question. So from that, again, expert opinion should be sort of. So then comes your reliability and its types. Sir explained well about that. Then regarding the validity, how it is valid and its type, then how it can be implemented following factorial analysis, and how it is implemented in our clinical use and application is what Sir has well told in that session. Sir has explained very well with the single slide only all these explanation, and it was very good and informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramya. Now we'll move on to the session. The first, steps in protocol development by Professor Amol Dongre. Sir is currently the head Department of Extension Programs, SPASH, and Professor in Community Medicine and Medical Education, PSMC Medical College, Gujarat. Sir was formerly working as Professor and Head of the Department of Community Medicine and Dean Research at Sri Manakula Vinayagar Medical College and Hospital, Pondicherry. As International Fellowship in Medical Education, he completed Masters in Health Professions Education from the Keele University in the UK. He is working as a FAMER regional faculty in 2 regional centers, PSG Coimbatore and Manipal University. Over to you, sir. We'll be happy to listen to you. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, madam. Good afternoon. And thank you for giving such an elaborate introduction. Right. Thank you very much. And I think most of the participants, as I was listening to the recap of the previous session, it seems they have already gone through a lot of detailed information on the topic. And this session on steps in protocol development is going to bring all these things together. And my job will be very easy to do that. So let me put my slides first. And is it clearly seen on the screen? Please give me feedback.
Yes, sir. Sir.
Okay. Right. So I'm going to talk about protocol development. What are the steps in protocol development? And my background is community medicine and demography and community medicine. and my background will have tremendous influence in the way we develop protocol. So you have to see this information in the light of my background. Right? So the purpose of this session is to take you through the steps in research process. I'm sure you must be aware of it by this time, but what I'm going to do is that I'm going to link the steps in research process with the steps in protocol development. And then finally, I'll be sharing some practical tips we have to keep in mind when we are working on our protocol, right? In between, if you have any question, you're welcome, or you keep your questions ready. And when my session is done, I'll invite you to ask those questions. So what is
video? No, not there.
so it is a document which provides the plan of your study. What is your intention? And what is your plan to achieve that intention? Has to clearly come.
Sir, voice also you don't want to talk, no?
Right. And second is the second point that you have to keep in mind is to make sure that your study plan is in alignment with your research question or objective or your purpose statement. And this alignment is a tricky job. You have to be very careful throughout the process when you develop your protocol, right? And the third thing is to see the content under these headings, because you have to put the content under those headings and explicitly state what are the steps that you are going to take and what kind of processes are you going to make sure that you achieve that step, right? So let me put this first slide and about on the research process. In this research process, we start thinking about carrying out any research when we face any issue or any problem that may be there in our educational setting, that may be there in a clinical setting. We encounter some problem, some controversy, some issue, and then we want to solve that problem. And solving that problem in a scientific manner, by scientific manner I mean that we collect systematic data around that problem, we analyze it, we interpret it, and then we find a solution to it. That is called as scientific process. And that scientific way of solving the problem involves all these systematic steps, right? So research is all about solving the problem in a systematic and in a scientific manner. But the perfect beginning of any research is a problem. You have to have a problem in hand. Second, once you have a problem in hand, you may match that problem with your clinical experience. You can speak to your peers to check whether they also face the same problem and how do they perceive it. And the third way is to do the literature search and find out, do other peers, do the peers in other institution, other country encounter it in a similar way? And what are the ways they use to solve it? And do I have some another way to solve that? And if that is so, then whatever way I have chosen to solve that problem, is that scientific? So you have to take it through the whole scientific process of data collection, analysis, interpretation. So we do a literature search to do the validation of our understanding with other peers in the field. And once we have done the review of literature, we refine the research question and make it more focused. And that's the purpose, indeed. And once we have a research question, then we ask ourselves the next question, that if this is my research question, then what method would be better? Is it quantitative, or is it qualitative, or is it a mixed method that I should be using to answer my research question? Please make sure that your research question is in alignment with the methods that you have chosen. And I see a big gap here. Many a times they have a research question in hand, but the methods that they choose are not in alignment with the question that they have. Then you have to think about design in more detail, that if I'm going to do a quantitative method, and if you think that the quantitative methods are the best one to solve the problem, then which quantitative method are you going to choose? You have plenty of options for it. Right from experimental study to descriptive research, you have all variety of options for that. If you have chosen a qualitative approach, similarly in qualitative approach, you have right from descriptive to interpretative approach. You have to choose option in that. If you go for mixed method, then you have 12 options for it. Which variant of mixed method do you think is appropriate for your research question? And once you make a decision about it, then you have to think about other steps. Believe me, this is really very difficult step when you do selection of methods for your research question, right? But this is a difficult step only for the novice researcher, but for seasoned and experienced researcher, for them it's a quite easy step to go ahead. Whatever method you choose, let it be quantitative, qualitative, or mixed method, you have to think about sample size and sampling, instrument for data collection. And I'm sure you must have learned by this time that this instrument has to be valid and reliable. Then you have to go for data collection, analysis, and interpretation. And then finally, when we write a report, we write discussion, conclusions, limitations, and directions. Now, after going through all these steps in research, I have a question for you. If you can write down in chat box, I would be glad. Among all of this that you have seen here, which one do you think is most difficult thing to have in hand? Can you write down in chat box, few of you? You need not match with my response. You just write down which step do you think is going to be the most crucial, most difficult, and you need to be careful for it. So any responses from you? Just I'll take one response.
Research question.
Yes, okay.
Instruments, protocol, research design, protocol, again research question.
Right. Thank you, madam. Thank you for doing that, capturing for me. That's wonderful. But for me, with my experience, I find the most difficult step for me is to have a research problem in hand. Because you need an eye to see that problem. You need a kind of wording to identify that problem. So as you become more experienced, you will find other steps more easy as compared to getting a problem in hand. But I do agree with what you have been mentioning, that they can be tricky parts when we go for it. When we start thinking about protocol development, we have to think about a title. What can be the title of my study? What I'm going to write in introduction? What kind of review is important? And then what are going to be your material and methods, such as what setting you write? And then one thing which we don't write in protocol, and I think that the research protocol is incomplete without writing that clearly, is what are the philosophical assumptions you have. All research, let it be quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods, they all are based on philosophical assumptions, and we have to be explicitly clear about our philosophical assumptions because they guide your research. And then we have to think about study design, sample size and sampling, then data collection. Go for data collection. How are you going to collect the data? And then what is your analysis plan? And then your plan to get clearance from research and SMVMC, and you have to start thinking about what are the documents that you are going to attach with your protocol. If you are using any copyright protected questionnaire, then do you attach permission from the authors when you submit your protocol? if you are planning to do some studies in some institutions, organization, you have to attach letters of permissions to access sample in that particular institution or in that occupational setting. You have to also attach the questionnaire, the data extraction form, and consent form in both English and in local language, which your participant should understand. Now we are going to see the small little details of each of these. When you develop protocol, what all you should have in the title, and what you should be thinking when you write under that title. So when it comes to title, what do you think? What are your suggestions? Can you write on in chat box? What are your suggestions? I mean, when you choose a title for your study, what kind of title would you like to have? And what are the rules that you have to follow for making a title? Plenty of things people mention about it, we'll be saying it. But are you aware that how to put a title for anything that we do? Write down in chat box if you have some responses about it. Yeah, PICO should be there, specific to objective, perfect. And primary objective to be captured, perfect. Yeah, I do agree. Yeah, that's true. When we write a title, I just use this rule that we try to keep it some 8 to 12 words. And we try to answer this question. It may not be possible for all. Yeah, not more than 15 words. Okay, just we have to keep it small. What, when, where. There are plenty of different ways people do when they write a title. And this is one title. When you are doing a mixed method study, this is the way that we write a title, right? Postmenopausal bleeding among rural women in Tamil Nadu, India, mixed method study. Some people try to put their title in this way. They put it in a question form. Why tuberculosis patient under RNTCP delay in healthcare seeking? The title should arouse interest among readers. A mixed method study, research from Wardha district, Maharashtra. And the other way is that, does an appreciative inquiry decrease false positive diagnosis during leprosy case detection campaign in Bihar, India? An operational research study. So some people, they mention a study design at the end of it to catch the attention of their reader, right? But yes, I do agree that try to capture your primary objective, keep word count less, choose words very carefully, and you can make it catchy and attractive to your reader. So that's about title. Then we have to think about writing an introduction section of your protocol. And most of the time, in introduction section, we write a review of literature. No, introduction means you have to give some key basic definition, state the problem in the context, and then find out the gaps in the literature, then justify why you need a research on this topic. And then you say, okay, if this is a problem in the context, if these are the gaps in the literature, then we need to study this topic for this purpose. And that's how you make a case why this study should go on, right? Be careful with your introduction section, right? Make it in the language, and make it in the language of a researcher. Use academic language here to convince the reader or your reviewer that how important it is to study that topic and what gap it is going to fill up in the literature and in practice. Now, the next thing, let's see some example here. What I mean by problem statement. But say in educational research and even in clinical research, I think everywhere we have to specify the problem. And what is the definition of problem? Problem means issue, concern, or controversy. And you will have to define this problem in the given context. For example, selection of student for a course. How will you select students for a course that you want to start and you have a specific outcomes in mind for that course? So you will have a question, what kind of students do I need to achieve those outcomes, to fulfill those job profiles? If you have a problem of poor treatment adherence, then you would naturally like to know why your patient did not take treatment. If you have a problem that most of the tools that you do use for your practice and for your measurements are not valid and reliable, you can start with a problem that you don't have those kinds of tools and you need to develop those. If you are running a distance learning course and students are not enrolling for it or discontinuing the course in between, or they have high dropouts, you would like to find out the solution to that. The very purpose of research is to find out solution to the problem. And to find out solution to the problem, we have to take that inquiry through a systematic process of data collection, analysis, and interpretation. But the first step of problem solving is identification of a problem which we need to solve by doing a research. Now, the next thing about purpose statement, which is little narrower than your problem. Problem is very broad, but then within that broad problem, we have to identify the purpose, which the purpose statement offers the direction or the focus of the study. It is further refined, more tailored for measurement. Now, here is an example for the purpose statement. For example, for quantitative component, you may wish to determine the relationship between reminder through phone and treatment adherence. And for qualitative component, if that is a part of your study, you have to state another objective mentioning to explore patient stories regarding use of SMS reminders to adhere to given treatment. Now, this is a kind of a mechanism by which we come from broad problem to a focused purpose statement for carrying out research. Believe me, this is little difficult part to put in any proposal. So that requires a very careful thinking when you do this exercise. Now, this is what I want to say here. You can put that in a Picot format as well if you want to put it in a if you have a plan to go for an experimental study where you need a question in hand. So you make a journey from more general to specific. That means you go from topic to focused research question. Now here it is. You have a research problem, that is lack of treatment adherence. It's quite broad. Purpose statement, it's further refinement to study why patients fail to adhere to recommended treatment. And if you think that you don't need to go beyond that and you just want to stop at the purpose statement, you can stop at that. But if you have a plan to go further, do experimental research, and for that you have a question, you can further focus it, further refine it, and you can state your research question as, does the use of SMS reminder help the patient to adhere to treatment? And you can specify the time framework as well. This exercise of shifting from more broad to more specific should be clearly demonstrated or clearly written in your protocol. That gives a confidence to reader that, okay, you know the problem in a broad sense, and you have tailored it to a researchable research question. So in that way, writing an introduction is not so easy job. You have to be careful about it. Go for that. Now, once you have that, right, once you state the objectives, what you have in your mind in protocol, the next section that we write is review of literature. And this part has a tremendous importance when you have to relook at your research question once again in the light of what your peers have done, so that you get another chance to refine your research question here. I'm sure you must have gone through review of literature and steps in doing literature review. But I'm going to put it up again just to help you how you put that in your protocol and what part you have to mention when you write for it. Review of literature is the process of justifying research problem. You can justify your research problem in 3 ways. 1, personal experience, used in qualitative research such as narrative research. But if you're doing master's thesis or PhD, we do not recommend you to use your personal experiences as a base for starting a research question. You may also speak to your colleagues and check your experience with them, right? And then validate your understanding with them. But the third thing that we say that what is the suggestion made by other researchers in their published articles? They are the important source for you to refine your research question. So we suggest you can consider first and second option, but third one is very important for you to bring a kind of a validity to your understanding. Now, if I ask you this question, what is review of literature? Because this section, if you read in protocol, it's quite often it's poorly written. There's not enough review of literature, and there is not enough transparency also. That what they write, that if you want to check it, there is no way for you to check that what you have understood written is correct or correctly interpreted. For that, you need to have some kind of transparency in that. But before that, I would like to ask you a question. What is review of literature? How do we define it? And what if you do is called as review of literature? Can you write down 1 or 2 responses in chat box? I'll just take 1 or 2 response and then I'll show you. So start writing. Okay, what is available in public domain about research problem and extensive search about the topic? Excellent. Right. Perfect. Thank you very much for your response. Review of literature is a written summary. Yes, what is already known in the topic done before. Right. Review of literature is written summary of articles, books, and other documents that describe the past and current state of knowledge about a topic for the purpose of study. So you should not just rely on articles available online. You have to visit the library, open books, and then please also refer the documents, guidelines in the given by the professional bodies, and then make a synthesis of it, make a case for it. Why? Because it gives a confidence to your reader that you are aware about what is happening in the field, right? And this is called, and this is a very important process for us to keep in mind. So why review of literature? Why do we go about it? Partly I have answered it. Theoretical and methodological knowledge about, yes, that's correct. To get to check what kind of methodologies and theories have been used by other researchers in the field to answer that research question. I'm impressed with that point because that is a point quite often ignored. You need to keep that right. Perfect. It helps to refine the research question. It helps to the research question from, it helps you to tailor down your research question from more broad to more focused. It helps you to choose the framework, as you have very rightly mentioned, to choose the theoretical base for carrying out your study. And it then helps in discussing the findings from a broader viewpoint. And that brings a kind of generalizability that what you are talking about, it is not just your observation, but it's something relevant to other researchers as well. And that type of write-up is important. It is just not having in mind, but it is putting it on the paper so that others, those who read your protocol, understand your intentions clearly. Having a good protocol is a perfect beginning for carrying out a good research, right, and a good thesis. So how do we do literature search? We have key terms. You will wonder why I'm telling you these steps, but they are important because I want evidence that you have done all these things right in your protocol. So think of key terms that we choose from study title or the purpose statement. 2 to 3 keywords we choose from title of the study or objective. We develop a search strategy, right? We use a Boolean operator such as and, or, and then we look at the literature. We select the literature which is relevant to our question. We read those articles, we write a synthesis of it, and then we draw the literature map. And then if you want to read more about it, I would suggest you to read Best Evidence in Medical Education Practice, guide number 3, to know the steps about review of literature. Now here is an example. This is a search strategy I used for my master's thesis, which I did in 2017. And I took the search strategy. This was developed for PubMed articles. I gave it to my guide and asked him that, is it okay? We got it checked by the librarian that this search strategy is perfect and okay for us to get the articles. And this search strategy should be given in your protocol for reviewers to understand that, okay, this is the search strategy you used. And then once you get the search strategy, you get the articles, you give a full disclosure that how many articles you got, how many you actually reviewed out of that, and how you synthesize the literature. That gives a confidence to me that, okay, you have been thorough with it and you have gone through it and it is worth to study that topic. You remember that resources are limited, time is precious. So in order to use those resources and time in an efficient manner, you have to do research on a meaningful topic. And review kind of frustration of reinventing already known things. If you do review of literature properly, you are likely to contribute something meaningful. Once you get the articles, take a printout of those articles, put that in file, read those articles carefully line by line. And then once you read it, you can organize your review of literature either in a thematic way. Okay, this is a problem statement. These are the factors responsible for occurrence of disease. This is the situation in Southeast Asia region, in India, and rest of the world. And then you conclude in the end that, okay, this is not studied in this region, so that's why we are going for it. You can give it a study by study review, or what I commonly practiced is combination of these two. You create a themes and under that you give articles author by author. At the end, try to draw the map of the concepts, right, and link them. This is called as literature map. Literature map tells you what is studied where and helps you to identify the gaps in the literature by doing a kind of a visualization. And you can call this as a conceptual framework. And this conceptual framework is crucial for developing the research question. And demonstration of this link in your protocol is important to understand that, okay, you got that stuff carefully, you have gone through that stuff carefully, and you got the idea, and you are doing work on something which is worth studying and meaningful. After you do review of literature, it's a very time-consuming process, right? And if you have done this review of literature very carefully, right when you develop protocol and not after you submit your protocol and get it approved, you can avoid frustration later, because sometimes it may happen that you get your protocol approved, but when you start review of literature, you come to know that most of the things that you are studying are known. There are already 30-40 articles available on the topic that you are studying. So then that's a waste of resources, right? So then you may study those variables which have been already studied. So that is why careful literature right when you do protocol development is important. Next, you have to think about material and methods. Remember, as a methodologist, I see confusion between two terms, methodology and methods. Do you think they are same or they are different? If you think they are same, write down in chat box same. And if you think they are different, write down different. So I would just like to hear 1 or 2 responses from you on that. Any response? Different. Okay. Different. Perfect. I'm happy to hear that they are different. They are very, very different. First, methodology is a strategic approach for knowledge building by considering the knowledge gap, by considering the philosophical framework, which I will be talking, and by ethical and legal framework of the country. This is methodology. Material and methods that we talk about is a technique of data collection and analysis. So it is a bit narrower term. They should not be used interchangeably. The third thing is the research design. It refers to the plan of action that links the philosophical assumptions to specific methods, which I will be mentioning after some time. They are distinctly different. So what you write under them has to be in alignment with these definitions. These are the main three philosophical assumptions. In fact, there are 4. The first philosophical assumption is positivism, where you believe in single truth and objective nature of reality. Second philosophical assumption is constructivism, where you believe in multiple reality and subjectivity. And third one is pragmatism, in which we are currently living. We call it as third methodological movement called mixed method research, where researchers use combination of positivism and constructivism. So they don't get into defining, but they just use, they're more problem oriented, and they use methods which helps them to answer their research question. So if you're doing a quantitative research, you have a positivism. If you are using qualitative research, you are a constructivist. And if you are using combination of these two, you are a pragmatist. Now, there is no culture of writing philosophical assumptions explicitly in proposals, particularly in our region. And we have to bring that practice to state the philosophical assumptions clearly, because research is all based on assumptions. Then we write down the context, right? We describe the context in which, setting in which the study is going to happen. And you have to describe the context in a very detailed way, that this study will be done in XYZ department in this institution. We have this type of patients coming, and we deal them in this way. And then you write down something about the department as well, which is relevant to the research question. I have a question, why? Why do we write context clearly? This is because it helps the reader to check whether their context match with yours. This helps them to understand for, yes, you have written for grounding, perfect. This helps them to understand the transferability of findings to their context. Are they relevant? Do you and I work in similar context? If so, then your findings are going to be relevant for me as well. Second thing is about explicitly state what kind of philosophical assumptions are you going to have in your study, and what assumptions are going to help you to answer your research question. Then give details about quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method. Don't just write down one line, or sometimes I see case control study or cohort study. Write down in a descriptive form. You have a plan to go for a case control study, and why you think that case control study is appropriate for it. So write down that justification for having that design for that particular research question. State it clearly. The next important issue is think about sample size and sampling. If you're doing quantitative research, then you have to choose a probability sampling. State what kind of probability sampling are you going to do. If you are doing qualitative research, you are going to do non-probability sampling. So you have to state what kind of non-probability sampling are you going to do, and why have you chosen that type of non-probability sampling. Always cite references for your decisions for readers to make a judgment that you are making decisions not just based on your perceptions or ideas, but you have a scientific base for making those decisions. If you're doing mixed methods, you have a big challenge because you have to explain both quantitative and qualitative part of it. And so you need to have an expertise in both quantitative and qualitative when you go for that kind of design. If you're going for data collection, think about questionnaire. You have learned how to develop a valid, reliable instrument or questionnaire for measurement of your research question. If you are doing qualitative research, you have to use an interview guide. You have to attach interview guide. If you are doing mixed method, you have to attach both. And if you are doing analysis on secondary data, then you may give them your data extraction form and the selection of your variables for that. In data collection, specify who will collect the data. What is the qualification of the person who is collecting that data, right? Say, for example, you're doing a study on domestic violence, then you would certainly like to choose female gender investigator so that women will be comfortable giving them responses. When will you collect that data? In daytime or evening time? And give them reason for choosing that hours. Say, for example, you may state that you will collect data evening hours with the assumption that people will be available at their home. Or you may do survey in the morning hours with the assumption that they will be available at home. And how will you collect that data, right? So are you going to record that on the questionnaire, or are you going to collect that data by doing interview and doing audio recording? State everything very explicitly and in a descriptive manner. Give details of your analysis plan. What kind of software are you going to use? What is the version? Do you have a licensed version or trial version, free versions of it with you? And what kind of variables do you have? What kind of independent variables are you going to deal with it, right? And then what kind of analysis will you be doing with those? What kind of test of significance you have in mind to test those relationships? If you're doing qualitative data analysis, what kind of codes and categorization? What is the framework that you're going to use? You have to give description of all that. Get the clearance from the institutional ethics committee. Attach the supportive document, consent forms, questionnaires. And in the end, make sure that you attach a Gantt chart, your timeline, that how you're going to achieve it, right? And source of funding if you have some expenses required to meet when you carry out your study. So think about all this. So that will check your study not only on a scientific ground, but will also check its feasibility in the given context. Will you be able to do that in the given time as well with the given resources? That's important to keep in mind. Now, I was just mentioning about analysis plan, which is often poorly written section in protocols. And quite often they are just copy pasted from their colleagues, what they have done. And it's quite common that they do not match with your intentions. So first check what is your intention. What is your primary objective? If that is so, then what kind of variables I'm going to deal with it? What is my independent dependent? Okay, to demonstrate that kind of relationship, what kind of statistical analysis do I need? And if that is so, then what kind of test of significance would be appropriate for that, considering the sample size I have in my study, right? So selection of variables is crucial, and start thinking about variables when you are developing protocol. A good selection of variables will help you to measure your outcomes in I would say in more precise and in more scientific way. Then if you have a mixed method, ask yourself a question: do you have expertise or do you have colleagues in your department to help you for both quantitative and qualitative data analysis? Okay, so now variable means something which can be measured and something which varies. And that's the definition you have to keep in mind when you select variables. You are often assigned guides when you carry out research, and you and your guide have to make this journey together. And one of the important steps that they should do it together is selection of variables, because if you miss variables in your questionnaire and if you forget to measure it, then you are going to not discover or not going to contribute that new finding which you were having in mind when you did review of literature. So review of literature is also going to help you to select variables for your study. Now, the last point I would mention, that the very purpose of developing your protocol or your study, carrying out your study, is to measure truth in the universe. For that, you have a research question. Take an example that your target population is all IV drug abusers in San Francisco, for example, and your phenomenon of interest is to find out how many of them are infected with AIDS virus, if that is true. So you have to measure everyone, but that is not possible. That's why you do a design, and your design is going to measure truth in the study. So you do a study plan and you write a protocol, and then you say your intended sample, you specify that intended sample and time frame, and you measure the phenomenon of interest by choosing some intended variables, such as proportion with antibodies to AIDS virus. So this is your protocol development. These are your ideas. So you're trying to measure truth in the universe by developing a scientific protocol. Howsoever hard you work on that, but you are going to have some errors and some errors in your inferences. So your effort should be to keep your protocol as close as possible to the truth in the universe so that you measure it. And when you actually implement it, you actually do a study, but you end up studying less than what you had intended, or you achieve your sample, and you actually measure the antibodies using some ELISA test. And then based on that study finding, you do some inferences. You are likely to do some errors at that stage also. So some errors at the protocol development and some errors at the stage of study implementation. So when there is a gap, what we call that as whatever you have intentions and what you actually do, that we call it as internal validity. And whatever your study findings finally measure, we call that as a kind of an external validity between your protocol. So if you develop a good protocol to measure, to take into consideration both internal validity as well as external validity, you are likely to produce a scientific truth to the universe for the community, scientific community, and that will be of relevance. And that is important. And we do errors in development protocol, and there are plenty of errors we do during implementation and compromises. And then what we get in the end is a study which is not internally valid, and the findings have no relevance to the scientific world outside. So protocol development is that important, and a very exciting and important intellectual step in your academic curriculum. So please see your master's thesis and PhD thesis as a wonderful opportunity to give meaningful contribution to the scientific community if you keep all those steps in mind. And finally, these are my last practical tips. There are many actually, but since I didn't know the intended crowd who is going to come here, but please make sure that your objectives and methods match with each other. That's the first flaw I see when I read proposal. Howsoever nice protocol you may have, always give it to your colleagues and ask them to become a devil's advocate and ask them to find out as many mistakes as they can and give them party if they do so that you can improve your proposal. Do not get emotionally attached with what you have developed. Keep it open for peer comments. They can really take it to the next level. Third thing to keep in mind, select good variables. Take help of your guide with your peer and help of your peers, because to select a variables, you need an eye. You need a kind of theoretical sensitivity. Have a good measurement plan and do it strictly, carefully, and systematically. Be honest and transparent, right? Do the documentation of everything that you do. That should be there in your questionnaire, so that if anybody want to do an audit and do the check of what you have done so far, they should have access to those documents. If you think that you are weak in design and you are very busy clinician, you work in clinical practice and you don't want to spend your too much time doing those conceptual thinking, or if you think that you need help in biostatistics, please consult them in advance, not after data collection, because they can really help you to improve the rigor of your study. It's okay if you get less articles on your topic. Rather, that's a good news. When I did my MD thesis, I just got 1 or 2 articles on it. And my colleagues used to say, oh, they got 20 or 30 articles. And I used to feel jealous of them, that they will get plenty of things to write in review of literature and I will not get anything to write in that. So in fact, if you get less articles, it's a sign that you are studying something which is not. There may be 2 reasons for it. One is that you have done really a bad literature search, or second, you are doing contribution to something very rarely studied topic on that. And the last thing, be careful with academic matters. There is an issue of academic dishonesty, that you think that, oh, I just want to get my proposal clear this way or that. And then you tend to copy paste the stuff what has been already reported and published. And then you try to align your study with already published article. Be original. You can be different than them. That's okay. Rather, you have to be different than them. Then only you can contribute something new. So if your study objectives, if your methods are very similar to what has been already reported, then perhaps you are not on the right track. You may not get a good output in the end. And so if you are exploring something new, you are going to have lots of challenges. And protocol is that first document that you provide in your research journey, which gives the confidence not only to others, but to you also, that you are going to make something new discovery or contribution in the field of science. So thank you very much for your patient listening. And based on your responses in chat box, I could make out that you were with me. And I'm sure that you were knowing lots of things already, but I just try to organize it in the way I understand it and just to share it with you. So thank you very much for your questions. And thank you all the team from AVMC, and special thanks to Bhatt sir and Mahalakshmi madam for inviting me to have this session. Thank you very much. It was indeed a pleasure. If you have any question, you're most welcome.
Thank you, sir. It was excellent.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, sir?
Yes, madam.
Suppose if there is a checklist, or if there is a tool which is available in the public domain. For example, if I want to use Kalamazoo's checklist for one of my communication skills evaluation thing, do we still need to take permission from the authors because it is in public open domain and
No.
it is a validated one?
No. If at the end of questionnaire, if no such issue is written, we can use that. But say, for example, some questionnaires, they write down at the end that you have to take a permission from the authors before you use it. That needs to be included.
Thank you, sir.
So,
There is a question in the chat box.
Chat box.
yes.
Yeah, please give more details about internal and external validity. Dr. Gomati wants to know.
Okay. Validity means that you measure what you are supposed to, and the what do you say? Your whole design, research design, will that measure the truth in the universe? And uh, if your study findings has to be externally valid, means can generalize your findings from the sample that you studied to the wider population. We call that as an external validity, or also called as statistical validity. So if I study the handful of samples, I choose them carefully, and if I choose the adequate number that I should study for that topic, then the findings that I get in that, if that is applicable to the universe or in which you actually wanted to measure the truth. So this shifting of interpretation from more specific to general is called as a kind of external value, that your findings are generalizable to the wider population. That is the external validity. For internal validity, that have you used a rigorous process? For example, in qualitative research, we do not have internal validity. But what we want to pay attention, that whatever you had a plan to measure, did you really measure those things, right? So that is what we call it as internal validity. In qualitative research, we call that as credibility. Can I trust your findings, that whatever you had intention to study, did you really study and measure those, right? So that's how we see it in that way.
So there is a response in the chat box from Dr. Vishnu Bhatt. Very nice talk.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Nothing. What I
And
learned from all of you people, I'm just putting it in words here. That's it.
so quite a few very nice talk, very informative, fantastic talk, and wonderful talk. Those kind of responses are there, sir. And one question is still there. What is best, a constructed tool or a standardized tool? Dr. Sudha wants to know.
Mm. Difficult question. Actually, I was reading a book by Presswall, Educational Research on Presswall, and he says that he used a line, standardized tool is a misnomer. He says, we say that that tool is standardized, but in which we work, they are so different. So even if you take a standardized tool, you have to do some contextualization for it. And then he wrote a nice chapter in that book on that standardized tool is misnomer. And we have to make efforts to contextualize it, to modify it. And if you think that the concept that you are measuring is not measuring or is not asking those questions in the context, you can for your own question. So there are 7 steps of questionnaire development. You can refer, if you write in Google 7 steps in questionnaire development, you will get how you can develop questionnaire for your studies. And my whole research practice, I have used standardized tools only on 2 or 3 occasions. Most of the time I had to develop my own because I work in mainly in social science, but in clinical setting, I'm not aware, but they may be applicable. If so, then please check the question. When you check the question, just check how will your respondent think about those questions. For example, if there is a question for socialization, and if you are asking a respondent that on weekends, do you go to pubs for chill? Now that line may not be relevant to rural youths if they are not going to pub to chill, say for example. So there will be certain items may not be culturally relevant. Or sometimes it may be inappropriate to ask in that culture. So then in that we need some contextual modification. So there are some steps for contextualizing the questionnaire. There are steps for developing the questionnaire and adapting the questionnaire to your. So you can refer literature on that.
Very nice talk. Very interesting. And most of it clarified. I think you will continue to support us.
Sure, sir. Most welcome. Thank you for your time.
Let us come online. So,
Yeah, Dr. Amol, namaste.
Namaste, sir.
I'm the Dean. Welcome you very much. Thank you very much. I could join the later part of your.
Sorry, sir. I have overshooted my time. I think I have taken
No,
your
no.
you started a little late. So it's okay.
Yeah,
You are well in time.
Thank you, sir.
Actually, one information for the participants, what Dr. Amol keeps telling that guide number 3 on research, educational research, which is available in our MEU library, actually right behind Dr. Vidyavati said. So you can actually go and take it. Any of you who want to do the questionnaire development and refer to literature on the subject, it is available. And there is a fantastic book on educational research, the green color book, what you can see in the thing. So that also can be used. That is for the information of participants. Thank you, Dr. Amal.
Thank you, ma'am.